some people just can never escape their own worst actions. Commission review time! And it's another book from Iain M. Banks's Culture series. Been a little while since we've tackled that. This one, Use of Weapons. This is an interesting one within this series. I would say of the stuff that I've read, I would consider this to be the most character-focused one by a bit. Some of the stories that I've read, like Surface Detail, Accession, are pretty large in scope, and they're covering a lot of characters, a lot of perspectives. And even something like Player of Games, while it is mostly limited to one character's perspective, it felt at least as much a story of the culture and, well, not the well, yes, the culture, but like the culture and the society he was integrating in and interacting with, as it was about him. This is minimally about the places where our main character Zakalwe goes and what's going on there. It comes up. It's not like it's not present, but like it's so not the point. The point is this guy. And it's interesting to see something this character driven in a culture story. I guess when I talked about state of the art, that kind of came close because with the way, oh boy, I have a hard time remembering a lot of these characters' names. With the way the guy who chose to stay on Earth was a little bit of a character study on him, but it wasn't as locked in on his perspective. That was just something we found out over time. Although, interestingly enough, we have a carryover character from that story in the form of Dizzy Sma, who was arguably the main character in that one and is not the main character here, though she is important. You certainly don't need to know the other one to follow this one. It is interesting to me how much the culture stories, how little they have carryover characters. Even some who I would love to see Demyson again. I really love that character. But anyway, Zakalwe is, well, he's a soldier. He's a fighter. He's an assassin sometimes. He does the dirty work. That's what he's good at. It's what he has done for the majority of his life. It's what he seems at times to try and get away from, but it's also what he can't seem to stop doing, and he doesn't seem to be able to stick with anything else. Now, it's hardly an original or unique concept to follow someone whose history and talent is violence as they fail to keep that violence out of their life. There's two main flavors that comes in. There's this person tried to leave that behind, but now it's come back for them. Let's watch them kick ass. That's your John Wicks. But then there's the sort of more attempt to make it a bit more tragic, stuff like the movie Logan, or honestly, at least from what I understand, the more recent God of War games, where it's like, these are people who have tried to leave violence behind them, but it still follows them regardless. What's interesting with Zakalwe is you get the sense that he part of him wants to leave this behind, but another part of him seems to be fully aware that he can't, and he's not good at anything else. Like, shortly after the opening, we actually come in on him. I'll talk about the structure in a minute. The structure is actually quite interesting. We come in on him in this situation where he's not working directly for the culture. And he's not from the culture originally. He was kind of brought in by them to do this kind of work. But he kind of acts of his own accord, doing something that is not strictly for them. So he hasn't been ordered to do this, but he's still acting in a violent manner. And it doesn't work out well. He legitimately seems to have trouble finding other ways to be for anything other than short periods of time. And as I said, the structure is quite interesting because it kind of starts at a single point and then there's two parallel stories. One that continues forward in time and one that does several jumps back. And it alternates between them. So we'll have the story that is moving forward in the present, which is him supposedly having left working for the culture and for special circumstances, which is, the CIA dark ops branch of this otherwise highly advanced and considers itself fairly peaceful interstellar society. He has stopped working for them, but they're bringing him back in to help retrieve somebody from a volatile situation and following him doing that and the ways in which he goes about it. And at the same time, with the other one that we're alternating through, it's going back a little bit further in time each time. Although it cheats in one, there's one where it cheats a little bit because it puts him in a situation where he's contemplating his own life and his own death, and he's thinking back to his childhood. So there's like a flashback within one of the ones that goes further back that lets the narrative drop in information that otherwise wouldn't come up in just yet in terms of the pace of stuff moving back. It's sneaky. I say cheats. I'm not bemoaning it. Actually, it was pretty cleverly done and done surprisingly seamlessly. But you find out the things that he went through that brought him to the point of the story that is moving forward, the lives that he has lived, the times that he has worked for the culture, and sometimes that has gone very, very badly. But he keeps doing it. And the times that maybe he tried to be away from all this and it didn't work, and going back to pivotal moments in his youth and decisions that were made by him and those around him that really seem to have shaped who he is. So it's interesting seeing somebody who, in terms of what the culture presents itself as, is not what they want the rest of the universe to think them to be. But the culture keeps using him and sort of exploring what makes a man like this. And Zakalwe is a really interesting character to watch play out and get more information on and really get a sense of. I find him to be quite a compelling character. I like him a fair bit. And as I said, the structure is very interesting. Part of the structure is covering a twist. And I don't think I have to say what the twist is in order to kind of give my opinion on it, which is that it's a perfectly fine twist. It's certainly not a bad twist. I don't think it carries the weight of the whole narrative, though. See, here's the thing when you put a twist at the very end of something, especially if it's a reveal twist. Because, like, when you do a plot twist, there are twists that alter the plot going forward, and then there are twists that change your perspective on what the plot has been up, the entire time up until this point. And it's that second one. And when you do that kind of reveal twist at the end of a narrative, you are kind of putting the weight of the entire narrative on it. Just structurally, by placing it there, you're kind of saying, like, this is the single most important thing. And I'm not going to say that it didn't alter any of my thoughts on anything that had gone on or impact my notions in any way, but it didn't change my notions enough from what they had been to feel like it justifies making it a right at the very end twist. I'm like, okay, so when I wrote my own novel, and I'm not just saying this to plug my book, although I will, available at your local bookstore if you don't feel like paying Amazon money. They can get it through Ingram. Talk to your local booksellers or library. They know what that means. Anyways, I have a twist in that book. And in earlier drafts, the twist was revealed at the end of the book. As published, I moved that to significantly earlier in the book, partially because I realized that while the twist was serving its purpose overall, putting it at the end made it load bearing, and the twist wasn't it didn't matter enough to support the weight of the whole story. So I moved it to an earlier point. I think the story worked a lot better because of that. And I'm not even necessarily saying that this twist should have happened earlier in the narrative. I mean, maybe that's an option, but I did find myself thinking like, okay, there's nothing wrong with this twist, but playing it like a final reveal, I'm not sure that enough pivots on this piece of information to support that. I don't know if anybody understands what I'm on about, or if people just think I'm talking out my ass. Again, it's not a bad twist. It's solid. It works. It's just not. It didn't feel like as big a thing as it should be when you have a literal like last few sentences of the book twist. You know what I mean? That having been said, this continues to it is funny to me that like for as much as Banks's culture is very much an idyllic sort of society, that so many of the books focus on special circumstances who do all the dirty work, the stuff that they're like supposed to be above. And part of me wonders if that's because, well, that makes for better stories. Otherwise, you're just telling a story of a society that works like all the time. Like, okay. So like part of it might be that. Another part of me wonders if it is his way of subverting his own premise and being like, yeah, sure, it looks great. This stuff's all going on in the background, though. Either way, I think it works. I think it's kind of fun. Okay, so one of the criticisms I've had for Banks's writing that's come up intermittently is his somewhat antiquated sexual dynamics. And I don't necessarily mean sexual as in sexual activity, but like men and women, gender dynamics with the characters often feel in some ways slightly at odds, because given the way that the culture, at least on paper, operates, it feels like it should have a more nuanced or layered or less stereotypical gender dynamic and breakdown. And yet, you know, here's a story with the manly man and his woman handler. Granted, like there's no romantic tension between them, which I absolutely do appreciate. But of course, the one who is over-sexualized is her. And like, okay, let me put it this way. There's a scene about middle of the book where there's these two characters, a male character and a female character. And I think they're siblings, twins, if I'm remembering correctly. This thing took me a little while to get through. Just bear with me. And there's a scene where Zakalwe goes into this room, and it describes her in such detail in terms of the way she is sitting, how little clothes she has on, and the shape of her breast. And then it just acknowledges that the other sibling, the brother, just walked into the room. I think maybe it has one line about the color of his clothes. Like, that's kind of what I mean. For as enlightened as the culture itself is about sexual dynamics, the way that it's actually written is a bit male-gazing. You get that with Sma as well, who is sexualized in a way that I'm kind of torn on, because on the one hand, like, I like how sexually liberated she is. On the other hand, I'm like, of course it's the woman who's depicted like that. What I will say, what helps this story is that at the very least, Zakalwe himself, I feel like some of his antiquated views and his, at times, very misogynistic thoughts that he has are a little bit easier to roll with, because as I mentioned earlier, he wasn't raised in the culture. He was adopted into it, so obviously he has pre-existing prejudices. So that part works okay. But, you know, there is still some of those dynamics that feel at odds with books about a society where you know, gender and actual physical sex can be changed very easily. So it is a little bit at odds, and it's one of the few recurring criticisms I've had for these books, and it like not in a they're worthless because of this way, but it like feels like a function of the time that they were written by a man who was probably trying to to bring more nuance and more interesting dynamics to that stuff, but just couldn't quite get it all. Couldn't quite shake off some habits of the time. But again, I haven't been talking a ton about the plot because the plot in many ways feels almost kind of incidental. It really is a character piece. It really is following Zakalwe on his most recent outing at the same time as you learn more about his past and just get it more filled in about how he has become the man that he is. And it's well done and it's well structured. And I thought this was quite good. I wouldn't, while it's a good character piece, I am ultimately somewhat more fascinated by some of the larger scale stuff. Like, I do think Banks is, while he has made some very good characters, I think his best skill is in world building and large scale dynamics. So I think surface detail and accession I still would prefer to this. But I think I like this one more than Player of Games, and I think I like it more than State of the Art. So this was good. This was solid. I guess that means this lands kind of in the middle for me for the culture stories that I have taken in. So yeah, that's another one from this author, from this series, a series that I would not be reading were it not for the commissions coming in, but I am glad to have read them. They are really interesting and quite enjoyable. And I do think, I kind of said before, the attempts to do this story of like, a man, it usually is a man who tries to leave violence behind but can't. I think this, honestly, largely thanks to the structure, is able to do that with a little bit more nuance than, and I'm not knocking this movie, it's a good movie, but a little more nuance than something like Logan can manage in just 2 hours of movie runtime. So it's a pretty good way to examine that kind of story. So, Use of Weapons. Have you read it? What'd you think of it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills. Enables me to do this as my living, even if you can't help me out that way. Like, share, subscribe. Those all help me out. Don't worry too much about that either. What we do around here is like we try and take relaxed attitudes. So just come on back next time you need a break. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Goddess Elida, Zubin Lafula, Jen, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Oliver B., Alyssa Pedersen, Movie Turtle, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Auntie Kate 808, Andre, Becky Sparks, Claire Wright, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Toku Blahuvian, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, Pal Barabajagal, Mary Mello, Mira G, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. If you want to help me ensure that I can keep these guys fed, as well as the other animals and strange creatures that sometimes occupy my house, check out the rewards on the Patreon. Yeah, hello to you too. Bless you.